We could have a big surprise tonight, folks. Big surprise.
All right, Donald Trump is hoping for a big surprise in the Badger State. Not that he needs it, but he could use it as voting is underway in Wisconsin in what will be the single event of the evening for both the Republicans and the Democrats. So no other race to talk about but this one. And if you're Donald Trump and you've lost this one and fears that you might be losing some traction, this could be a very pitiable night indeed. Way too soon to tell. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto to John Roberts now in Milwaukee on how this is shaping up and what's at stake and for whom. Hey, John.
Neil, good afternoon to you. You know, Donald Trump and Ted Cruz continue to duke it out for the Badger State's 42 delegates. We're at one of 9 phone banks that Ted Cruz has got going in the state of Milwaukee, reaching out to every voter they could possibly get their hands on. Room there full of people, a room full of people over here. Should point out to you, Neil, they just had Chick-fil-A and cake, so there's a little tiny bit of a food coma going on here. But Donald Trump as well, he's working hard trying to prevent Ted Cruz from getting that win. He really barnstormed the state for the past 3 days, going all around the state, brought in his wife Melania last night for a couple of events. He's got a little bit of a problem with Republican women, 47% of whom say they would not vote for him. So he thought that bringing in Melania last night might help him with that problem. But neither Donald Trump nor Ted Cruz are able to shake Ohio Governor John Kasich, who continues to insist he is in this thing all the way until the July convention.
I don't think he should be staying. You know, if you think of it, Jeb did better than him, right? Marco did much better than him. Many people did much better than him and they got out. He's just a stubborn guy, so let him play the game.
How do we go to a convention and they pick somebody that can't beat Hillary? I mean, you know, it's great to be the nominee, but I think our whole purpose is to win an election. And, you know, we're going to continue to do. I'm not going to be a pincushion. I'm not going to be a marshmallow.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Yeah, we've heard him say that before. Neil, you know, there's a lot of talk about the rules governing the convention. I did a lot of looking into that in the last couple of days. John Kasich can go in to this convention not having satisfied Rule 40B, which means that he would have to have a majority of delegates in 8 states, and delegates can vote for him. In the first ballot, his delegates can vote for him. When delegates become unbound, they can vote for him. If he were, through successive ballots, to achieve that 1,237 necessary for the nomination, he would then be said to control the majority of delegates on the floor. They can then go to the Rules Committee and say he satisfied the provisions of Rule 40B, and he can be in contention to be the nominee. So it's a long shot for John Kasich, though he wouldn't say it is, Neil, but it would be possible for him to be the nominee. And I think he's doing all of this, Neil, because he knows journalistically how much you want to see a contested convention this
Absolutely,
year.
And you too, young man. But, you know, by that definition, this 40B rule, whatever they call it, Ted Cruz wouldn't satisfy that requirement either, right?
I'm sorry, Neil, I just missed the last part of that.
That Ted Cruz wouldn't satisfy that 40B requirement of getting 50% or more.
Ted Cruz wouldn't satisfy
right?
the last part of that?
Right.
Ted Cruz should be able to satisfy Rule 40B. I don't think he would have any problem on that front. Let me move out of this room here, Neil, because there's so much wireless traffic going on here. I'm losing you just a little bit. I don't think Ted Cruz would have any problem with Rule 40B, particularly looking ahead down the road. He's really got his sights on California. The polls have narrowed there. Donald Trump had been well in the lead. It's now almost even up there. That's 172 delegates, winner take all. So I think Cruz is positioning himself to put himself in a good spot where he will go into the convention, if not with a majority of delegates, because that would mean he'd need to win 82% of everything that's left, but certainly in a good position to say to the party and to the delegates, I'm the only person who can stop Donald Trump, so why don't you rally to my side?
All right, John, thank you very, very much. Well, Wisconsin is what they call one of those winner-take-most states, which we frequently talk about here in the press, and I have no idea what we're talking about. But it can be a winner-take-all situation if the chips fall a certain way. Who better to sort it all out than my buddy Professor, the man who loses all the bets with me, not Larry Sabato, the UVA Center for Politics. Professor, good to have you. What does it mean, the winner-take-most aspect of this state?
It means that there are going to be delegates assigned to the statewide vote, and the person who wins the statewide vote, even by one vote, will take that portion of the delegation, and then you have winner-take-all by congressional district for the rest of the delegates. That's what you have in Wisconsin.
That's what I thought. Now, let's get to this other issue about, let's say Ted Cruz were to take all of them. 42 delegates, which is an uphill battle, I grant you, he'd still be an awful lot behind.
He would still be well behind, but this would be a major setback for Donald Trump. You know, we're at the position now, Neil, where your dream of the contested convention is close to coming true. And if Donald Trump loses all or even most of the delegates in Wisconsin, it means he has to make up some of those delegates someplace else. Now, 2 weeks from now, he's got a great chance to get a majority of the vote in New York and sweep that delegation. That's winner take all if you get more than 50%. And a week after that, he has a good chance to get the lion's share of the delegates, at least the delegates that will be pledged to candidates in Pennsylvania and also a number of other northeastern and mid-Atlantic states that are voting then. But I can guarantee you already, it's obvious to everybody that this is going to come down to California on June 7th. California and the other states voting that day, but mainly California. Donald Trump will have to outperform what even maybe he had planned to do in California in order to cut off the 6-week period of negotiation between the end of the primaries, June 7th, and the gaveling to order of the convention on July 18th.
Looking at the math right now, you need the 1237. I understand that. The Trump people have been arguing, Donald Trump himself has been arguing, look, if I've got, hundreds of more delegates than the closest guy to me, then it'd be a darn shame if I end up not getting that nomination. But as you've pointed out to me in successive ballots, anything can happen, and in the past anything has. How do you think all this sorts out? In other words, if we get there where there is a need for multiple ballots, how messy could this get?
Oh, somewhere between very messy and extremely historically messy. Somewhere in that general vicinity, Neil. So, in other words, the answer is messy.
I got you. But is it always fatal to the party that has to endure it? I mean, as you pointed out, I mean, it worked out okay for Garfield. It worked out okay for this guy, Abraham Lincoln. So there is this sort of bias people have that, well, it's always going to be messy. Maybe recent history certainly suggests that in '76 with the Republicans, in 1968 with the Democrats. So it just is very divisive, period.
I would put it this way. You would never want a convention like some of the ones you just mentioned if you could avoid having them. But the one I always point to is 1968 for a couple reasons, Neil. It was at the end of August. I mean, as late as you could possibly have a convention. Why? Because the incumbent president, Lyndon Johnson, who thought he'd be running for another term when they set the date, set it around his birthday. So Hubert Humphrey had the disaster of the Chicago convention with all the riots and the tear gas, and there couldn't have been any more division. He was over 20 points behind at Labor Day. It looked grim. He lost by 0.5% just 2 months later. Now, the Republicans this year have their convention in mid-July. So let's say it's a disaster like Chicago. Well, it's a lot longer from mid-July to November 8th. I believe it's November 8th, the longest possible time for a general election. So is it possible to recover? Yes, and the calendar actually gives Republicans extra weeks to do it. Would I bet that's going to happen? I never bet you unless it's a sure thing, Neil.
Absolutely. Fine. Or ice cream is involved. Thank you, Professor. Always good seeing you.
Thank you, Neil.
All right, well, the president right now is taking aim at a lot of companies that do some sort of fast and loose things when it comes to avoiding taxes here. A former Republican presidential candidate, Texas Governor Rick Perry, on that. Governor, always a pleasure. I know you're backing Ted Cruz.
Thank you, Neil.
I don't know his specific views on inversions, this idea of companies that go abroad to take advantage of lower tax rates there. In the case of Pfizer, scooping up the Irish firm Allergan to take advantage of much lower tax rates in Ireland, reincorporate there. Now you have signs that the president is changing the rules, saying you can't do that. What do you think of that?
Well, there's two issues at hand here. One is, why are people moving offshore? And that's pretty obvious. We got, in most cases, the highest corporate tax rate in the world. If the president wants to address why businesses are leaving this country, he ought to address the corporate tax rate, not decide arbitrarily that he's going to change the rules in the middle of the game. And the second issue here is, I'll be real honest with you, I'm not sure the Treasury Department has the authority to do what they're talking about doing. So, you know, two big issues. If the president truly cares about creating jobs and wealth and building the economy up in America, lower the corporate tax rate, quit all of this, you know, sleight of hand, if you will, by changing the rules in the middle of the game and talking bad about American businesses that are trying to make their bottom line stronger because the corporate tax rate is so high in America.
You raise a very good point that they wouldn't be even thinking of doing this if it wasn't, you know, so mathematically in their interest to do so. But do you think that Republicans have to have a better response on this, Governor, your own candidate included, that even Donald Trump has said these inversions irk him, that a lot of companies do try to dodge taxes here by playing fast and loose with the accounting rules? So oddly enough, the front runner right now for the Republican nomination is kind of on the same page as Barack Obama. What do you think of that?
Well, I think we need to talk about how do you make businesses welcome in this country. We did that in the state of Texas over the 14 years that I was governor. It's the reason that we created more jobs and more businesses moved here. You move to where capital flows to where it's most welcome. And we did that in the state of Texas. Same's true at the national level. If you make businesses welcome in this country, they'll stay here. This isn't rocket science, but if all you're interested in is creating more and more tax burden so that you can fill the Treasury up, then businesses are going to continue to find ways to get out from under that heavy hand of government taxation.
Do you feel that if Republicans don't have a better response on this issue, though, they look and sound like they're in the hip pocket of fat cats?
Well, I think the proper response is let's lower the corporate tax rate. Let's put some common sense into the regulatory climate. Let's give businesses reasons to stay in this country and quit looking for ways to help their bottom line. That's the real conservative message, and frankly, I think it's the right message.
Now, I understand you watch, obviously, all the election returns when they come in, and that you're partial to watching them on Fox Business, I understand, not any place else. That's about right, isn't it?
Is there another place?
Thank you. All right, Governor Rick Perry, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
That was completely unrehearsed America.